McConnell built a conservative Supreme Court. Why doesn't he want you to know? Mitch McConnell wants you to know, the court that McConnell built, the Senate Minority Leader is, more than anyone else, responsible for its current configuration, is an unremarkable, by-the-books institution. In McConnell's telling, the court is an ideologically unpredictable body that produces diverse outcomes, and, he says, the numbers back him up. You've heard about damned lies and statistics. The maxim applies to the Supreme Court, too. The Kentucky Republican is using numbers to try to sand the edges off a hard-right court, and the most intriguing thing about his argument, made in a recent Post op-ed, is that he felt compelled to make it at all. Building a conservative-dominated federal judiciary has been McConnell's passion project, but his greatest passion is achieving, or, in this circumstance, regaining, power. With control of the Senate up for grabs next year, McConnell must be worrying about whether the court's actions, in particular its overruling of Roe v. Wade, are taking a toll on his chances of retaking the chamber and again becoming majority leader. Because that is the best explanation for why McConnell is choosing to minimize the enormity of his accomplishment, his transformation of the Supreme Court from a wobbly center-right institution into a far more conservative, at times aggressively radical, body. Under McConnell's no-holds-barred stewardship, Justice Antonin Scalia was replaced, not by President Barack Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland, but by President Donald Trump's, Neil M. Gorsuch. Justice Anthony M. Kennedy retired to make way for Brett M. Kavanaugh. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died just before the 2020 election, and McConnell muscled through her replacement, Amy Coney Barrett. The bottom line, one significant shift to the right, Kavanaugh, and one mammoth one, Barrett. Two seats that should have gone to Democratic presidents were instead handed to Trump. Thank you, Senator McConnell. And the new justices delivered. Abortion rights, gone. Affirmative action, gone. Gun rights, dramatically expanded. The administrative state, deconstruction underway. Religious liberties, triumphant, separation of church and state, not so much. Does this sound ideologically unpredictable to you? What a difference 5 years makes, Justice Sonia Sotomayor observed, dissenting from the six-justice conservative majority's ruling in favor of a Christian website designer opposed to making websites celebrating the marriage of same-sex couples. Sotomayor's point is undeniable, yet McConnell prefers to blur it, and to obscure with statistics that assign equal weight to cases of dramatically varying importance. One Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, wiping out constitutional protection or abortion rights, or one Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, eliminating the use of racial preferences in college admissions, matters a whole lot more than a slew of more technical, less ideologically freighted decisions. Let's pause to give McConnell's argument its modest due here. This term looked different from its predecessor. There were fewer 6-3 opinions in which the six-justice conservative majority was arrayed solidly against the three remaining liberals. 3 of the 6 conservatives, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr., Kavanaugh and, to a lesser extent, Barrett, proved themselves unwilling to adopt positions as extreme as their even more conservative colleagues. Some radical positions advocated by red states, Alabama's contention that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional, North Carolina's bid to get the court to adopt a broad reading of the independent state legislature theory, Texas' effort to stop the Biden administration from setting immigration enforcement priorities, turned out to be bridges too far even for this court. And as much as the conservative justice's legal philosophy meshes nicely with the Republican Party's political agenda, there remains a difference between partisanship and ideology. The conservatives aren't solidly, in the tank for Trump. But McConnell badly overstated his case. Evidence from this past term indicates that the court's defining characteristic isn't polarization, he wrote. It is, instead, a politically unpredictable center. This could scarcely be more misleading. Once upon a time, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, I covered a center-right court that could be accurately described that way. Justices Sandra Day O'Connor, David Souter and Kennedy staked out that ground. The last two terms have witnessed the dismantling of their most important handiwork, preserving the right to abortion and upholding the use of race as a factor in college admissions. Roberts, Kavanaugh and Barrett are not centrists, not even close. They are committed conservatives who happen to occupy the center of a court that has veered dramatically to the right. Liberal victories are few and far between, and they largely consist of being able to persuade a few conservative justices to keep the status quo in place, not taking the law in any expansive new direction. McConnell might not want you to understand that, but you should, and, McConnell notwithstanding, you should vote accordingly. McConnell built a conservative Supreme Court. Why doesn't he want you to know? Mitch McConnell wants you to know, the court that McConnell built, the Senate Minority Leader is, more than anyone else, responsible for its current configuration, is an unremarkable, by-the-books institution. In McConnell's telling, the court is an ideologically unpredictable body that produces diverse outcomes, and, he says, the numbers back. How the myth of a model minority works to divide Americans. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about Bobby and Annie, two of my high school classmates from 30 years ago. They used these American names instead of their given names. Bobby, whose given name I never knew, is of Japanese descent. Annie, whose given name I always knew, is the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants. By any names, they are both Americans, born and bred. It was the early 1990s, and I wondered why so many Asian American students picked new names. We grew up in North Carolina at a time when elementary school teachers wheeled out big TVs on steel media carts so we could watch college basketball in our classrooms. We could pronounce the name of Duke University's former coach, Mike Krzyzewski, before we could tie our shoes. If we could say all those consonants, then we could say Annie's given name. Meanwhile, Black Americans were becoming more creative with their names, and, let me tell you, Katedria wasn't changing her name to Kate for anyone. In this roundabout way, Bobby and Annie taught me about the model minority myth. Bobby was the smartest kid in physics class, and had applied to some of the nation's most prestigious universities. One of our jealous classmates taunted him ruthlessly about it, especially any time Bobby didn't get the highest grade on an assignment. The two bickered constantly, but whenever Bobby started to get the best of him, the other kid would flatly reply, Hiroshima. Nagasaki. Annie sat behind me in French class, and we became fast friends. It wasn't long before she noticed the college admissions process was stressing me out, and she made it her mission to lift my spirits. We celebrated the good news whenever it arrived, and she took the sting out of the bad when it showed up in a thin standard envelope. After I showed her a rejection letter one morning, she waved it off, saying, in the Chinese zodiac, you were born in the year of the rabbit, the luckiest sign. Something better is coming. Annie and I reconnected a while back on